This episode is titled Le Chat Chalet Car. If I butchered that pronunciation, my bad, I don't know French. In fact, seeing the cat in the cabin was a surprise for me on my first watch of this episode because at the time I was ignorant as to what the title meant. The French part of this title of course translates to the cat cabin, although chalet is a borrowed word we do use in English as well to refer to that sort of building. The cat, who reveals that she's frickin' ancient in this episode.
The first vacation I've taken in 150 years, and I have to deal with tourists.
The cat essentially co-opted a train car to be her new place of residence and modified it to be a winter retreat by importing a whole lot of Randall. The start of this episode has the main cast unknowingly using Randalls to have a snowball fight. A very wholesome snowball fight at that, even with Simon involved. Heck, the post-armistice interaction between Tuba and Simon could even be considered to be pretty cute.
Armistice means no more snowballs.
I know.
Except that in light of episode 5, it's hard not to recall the intensity of Simon's hatred for denizens, and realize that Tuba's playful roughhousing is legitimately infuriating and emasculating for Simon. During this opening snowball fight, Grace and Hazel continue to deepen the bond they recently forged.
What would I do without you?
You would die until you're dead.
That was real cute on the first watch, but in hindsight, oof, that almost happens after Hazel leaves Grace. But in the present, Hazel cutely schooling Grace on how to make snowballs results in Grace finally taking note that her number may have decreased, and Grace's fear is confirmed when the strong empathetic connection she formed with Hazel manifests. Having to grapple with losing her points puts Grace into a dissociative funk for most of the episode. This state of temporary despondency leads Grace to overlook how traumatic having to stay in the cat's cabin is for Simon. In the last episode, we saw just how touchy of a subject the cat is for Simon, but now we get to viscerally feel his panic. When Simon sees Samantha, it triggers his fight-or-flight response. You can hear it in the music. There's this rhythmic war drum beat that kicks in that's reminiscent of the sort of tune that would accompany a marching army. Take a listen to the background music in this scene.
We gotta go.
We just got here.
We're not staying here.
It's a very Simon-inspired bit of sound design, as it harks back to the boy's militaristic view of the world around him. For Simon, merely leaving the cat's abode is comparable to an army having to flee from a battle. I generally don't talk enough about how stellar the sound design in Infinity Train is, as the subject isn't exactly my forte, but I really wanted to appreciate this example in particular of the background music reflecting the inner turmoil of a character. The drums change to a new beat of progressively rising intensity.
No.
As Simon's breathing becomes labored while he appears to fight back against having a full-blown panic attack. Man, I've been in that exact pose, bent over with hands against the wall, looking down, trying desperately to swallow enough air. It's not a fun place to mentally find yourself. Grace would normally be sympathetic towards Simon's situation, but she's distracted by other issues regarding her number, and thus the predictable actions of her friend end up annoying her.
We're leaving.
Simon, the snow's too heavy. We have to hunker down.
And stay here with her?
And figure things out.
Figure what?
I'm gonna go look for supplies.
Grace has already mentally resigned to waiting out the blizzard, so to her, Simon's behavior seems like whining. It registers as futile complaining, when it should probably register as something closer to PTSD. Simon is trying to temper the severity of the trauma he is reliving. That's why he's not searching the lodge for a way to escape himself. He erroneously assumes Grace will look in his stead and finds himself at a loss when she doesn't.
So what am I supposed to do?
I don't know, Simon. Do I need to make every decision for you?
This situation reveals an underlying friction between the two that's been there for quite some time, but has been left below the surface, so to say, because it's usually not that big of a deal for Grace. Simon admires her and looks to her for guidance, but it seems Simon also formed a slight dependence on the person who did save his life. But this dependence does, at times, irritate Grace. And during this time, Grace is mentally overclocked. She does not want to feel responsible for Simon's well-being, and thus ends up brushing him off the one time that she probably should not have. And unfortunately for Simon, exploring the cabin alone leads him to stumble upon the cat's new collection room, which only further manifests his childhood trauma. I think it's strongly implied that the miniature Simon steps on is one that he made as a child while traveling alongside the cat, which would serve to mentally place him back into the headspace of his vulnerable 10-year-old self. And then while in this headspace, he gets jump-scared by a statue of a gome, which only further served to recreate the event that scarred him. What a nightmarish room this must have been for him. Yes, Simon is unquestionably a scumbag, but this episode really makes you empathize with the pain he's carrying by showing us the severity of the aftermath that it carved into his identity. Simon's incessant need to wedge himself between passengers and any denizen companions they might have, as we saw at the end of the previous episode and back in Book 2, stems from the cat abandoning him to a gome when he was still a child. Simon was left behind when he was still getting accustomed to the dangerous life on the train and had nobody else but Samantha to rely on, so the traumatic experience doubled up as an ultimate breach of trust. Simon is dead set on preventing what happened to him from happening to any other passenger. From his perspective, it's an inevitability for denizens to eventually betray passengers. It's fairly rare for Simon to display empathy, but most of the time it does happen, it manifests in this misguided form.
She was my tuba.
The entire scene of Simon opening up was just great. The harsh whistling of the tea kettle denoting the rising tension was a nice touch. The legitimate regret and sorrow in the cat's voice was extra powerful because we're used to her character being somewhat sassy and self-righteous.
You're not wrong.
Something else that hit me pretty hard was Hazel tearing up from understanding what a pivotal moment in Simon's life this must have been. And of course, the delivery of Simon's dialogue was phenomenal.
Every minute I'm in this cabin with the cat is like another weight pressing down on my chest. And you don't even seem to care.
The cracking of his voice, you can feel him holding back tears. Simon's voice actor did a great job with the character. So, a big component of this episode was establishing this dispute in order for the audience to witness what a strong bond Simon and Grace actually share. Simon and Grace have grown up together side by side over 8 years or so, and this episode shows that while sometimes they may have conflicts with one another, they are capable of working through them. When Simon finally works up the nerve to be forthright and verbalize what he's feeling, Grace is not only capable of being apologetic, she trusts him enough to be honest right back, and she shares the secret that has been troubling her.
I didn't want the Apex, or you, to see me like this. Think less of me.
It actually reminded me a tad of when Lake and Jesse decided to be honest with each other, which thinking back was also the 4th episode of the season, wasn't it? So, in other words, this episode makes us think that if one of these characters is capable of growing and changing, the other character may follow suit.
I'm always with you.
Only, of course, for that potential story route to be crushed in future episodes to make things more tragic. I really dug the development of this episode, and I think it was really good story crafting. Although those ooh-goo eyes were a bit much for me, I gotta say. While the middle portion of this episode was quite dour and tense, the tail end has a nice calming dose of Randall to liven our spirits with his charming watery whimsy. Or you can wonder about how goddamn awkward and creepy it would be to ingest Randall and have to sweat out Randall or piss out Randall. Your blood could consist of Randall, thus making him the most powerful bloodbender of all time. Randall is pretty scary, man. Beneath the depth of that lovable face dwells a monster. Also, as far as lightening the mood goes, we cannot forget Frank. You very beautiful bastard!
Huh?
The only other time Infinity Train has made me laugh as hard as with Frank was back when Jesse nearly shot out his eyeballs in Season 2. Man, I wish I had Frank in my life.
Hey, I'm making pancakes. The kids got any allergies?
Not now, Frank.
Okay.
I have to mention the final shot where Simon gives a sad goodbye to the cat.
Au revoir.
Because it gives the audience so much hope that perhaps Simon could be capable of becoming a better person. I mean, look at him! Look at that face! Look in his eyes! Look at the potential for growth in those eyes! Don't you see it? I thought I saw it. And then the next episode does this way more. And we'll talk about that in the review of the following episode. Hey, thanks for watching. This channel has been on another involuntary hiatus of sorts, cause my mental health has just been really bad. But I'm back again. We'll see if we can maintain some consistency. Before y'all bounce, I've got updates about what's gonna be coming out on my channel. Obsidian, Adventure Time Distant Lands Obsidian, airs either in a few hours or it has already aired. Yeah, I will be reviewing that, don't you worry. After my Obsidian review, I will finally release my Stuck in Production Hell Forever, long-awaited tarot-based analysis of the Stakes miniseries. I really wanted to finish this video in October and release it for the Halloween season, but unfortunately that just didn't work out, so now it will probably be out sometime in December. If you are one of my supporters on Patreon, you will be able to view my Stakes video early in chunks. I currently have the introduction available, and the sections on each respective vampire will follow as we get closer to the release of the final video. Alright, see ya! Hope you all managed to view Obsidian.